I never imagined that a piece of flying equipment would become the window into the darkest truth of my life. But here I am, staring at my prize drone, an expensive, high-tech hexacopter that I'd bought with the justification of using it for a side business. That's what I told myself, at least. Truthfully, it became an escape from the creeping tension in my marriage. Whenever my wife, Eva, went on those mysterious late work calls and weekend getaways, I found myself out in the field, practicing flight maneuvers, pretending to scout property for real estate companies. Deep down, I knew I was avoiding something. Tonight, the routine was the same. Eva had left, a vague excuse trailing in the air about a last-minute meeting with her boss, Mark. Her words echoed with a hollow familiarity, as if she didn't even try to make the lies sound convincing anymore. With my drone's controls in hand, I wandered into the cool night, my stomach twisted with unease. A bitter voice inside me muttered that I'd find her. I'd find whatever it was that had torn her away from me and set her adrift. So I did something I never thought I would. On impulse, I decided to fly the drone not over open fields but towards the marina. Eva had mentioned her boss Mark was working on his new yacht down by the docks, and if that's where she really was, I'd see it. Flying there, I couldn't shake the image of Eva's suspiciously late nights or the increasingly cold way she brushed past me at home, lost in her phone or checking the time. It was more than neglect. It felt intentional. The drone's camera flickered to life, and I guided it towards the marina, where the boats sat, silhouettes against the moonlit water. And then I saw it, a boat gliding slowly, away from the dock and further out. On the deck were two figures, close, intimate, like lovers sharing a secret embrace. Zooming in, my heart sank as I recognized them, Eva and Mark. As my eyes took in the scene, reality closed in, crashing over me in sharp, devastating waves. I felt like I was drowning, unable to move, and I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen. They laughed, drank, and moved in ways that didn't belong in a professional relationship. My pulse thudded, angry, humiliated, and yet somehow numb. My mind raced through options. I could call her right now, confront her while I had proof. But then what? A phone call would barely scratch the surface of this betrayal. I knew I had to do more, to reveal every secret she was hiding. I took a breath, fingers trembling as I brought the drone back, my resolve hardening. There was no turning back. I'd uncover every hidden truth, one by one, and expose her betrayal for what it was. The anger from watching Eva with Mark simmered into a cold resolve. I'd always been the steady one in our marriage, the one who'd listen patiently, who'd sacrifice my own dreams to support hers. Now, all those sacrifices felt like a noose tightening around my neck, choking me with the sting of betrayal. I knew I couldn't storm in unprepared. A confrontation would only end in more lies, more excuses. Eva had become too comfortable in her web of deceit, too arrogant. I needed proof, undeniable and inescapable. And so, I devised a plan, one that would leave her with no escape. Back in my workshop, I plugged the drone's camera into my laptop, carefully saving the footage. Every lingering glance, every stolen touch, preserved in crystal-clear detail. Evidence. Evidence that I'd confront her with when the time was right. But this wouldn't be the only footage I'd collect. No, I'd document every betrayal, every moment of deceit, and make her confront what she'd thrown away. Over the next few days, I followed a routine. During the day, I was the devoted husband, the one she'd betrayed without a second thought. I cooked, kept our home tidy, and listened to her endless complaints about her job, all while my mind raced with strategies. At night, I became the hunter. My drone was my weapon, my silent witness, and I recorded every second I could of her secret life. The moments Eva did spend at home grew shorter and shorter. Her excuses became flimsy, sometimes nonsensical. Late-night meeting with Mark or a weekend business retreat seemed to be her go-to responses. The irony of her audacity grated on me, each life fueling my determination. I bided my time, observing, gathering everything I could, every inconsistency in her stories. Her carelessness was almost an insult, as though she thought me too oblivious to notice her slipping away. Then, one night, I got a notification on my phone, a movement alert from the GPS tracker I'd quietly installed on her car. Watching the small on the screen move, I felt a surge of satisfaction. She was headed to a location nowhere near her supposed late-night meeting. I grabbed my drone and followed her from a distance, keeping just far enough not to be detected but close enough to watch her every move. She pulled up to a secluded restaurant on the outskirts of town, the kind of place designed for privacy. Not long after, Mark arrived. Through the drone's camera, I watched them laugh, whisper, and linger over wine. The audacity of it burned into me, but I kept steady, focused, capturing it all. As I collected more footage, I felt a strange calm wash over me. This wasn't just about catching her in the act anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Every recorded encounter, every kiss, every embrace, became a piece of armor. I was preparing for the moment she'd have to face the truth, and I could feel that moment drawing closer. The days blurred together, each one punctuated by a new deceit, a new excuse. Eva seemed unaware that I was slipping further away, mentally distancing myself with each passing lie. I watched her with a detachment that shocked me. The love we'd once shared felt like a distant memory, hollowed out and replaced by a quiet, seething resentment. Eva came home one evening with that same, carefree smile plastered on her face. She tossed her purse on the counter, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand, a constant companion these days. Her explanations were becoming mechanical. Dinner meeting ran late, or Mark needed help with last-minute projects. And each time she said his name, I felt the urge to call her out right there, to demand answers. But I held back, knowing I wasn't ready for the grand reveal. Not yet. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen, her face lighting up briefly before she slipped it back into her pocket. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and simply watched. She looked up, catching my gaze, and for a moment, her smile faltered. There was something there, an almost guilty expression that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "You okay, Ryan?" she asked, her voice a little too casual. "Yeah, I'm fine," I replied, forcing a small smile. "Just tired, I guess." She nodded, but I could see a flicker of relief pass through her eyes. She thought she was in the clear, that her secret was still safe. It was almost laughable. I waited until she went upstairs to check her phone, the notifications she couldn't bear to read in front of me. I took out my own phone, pulling up the latest footage I'd captured from the drone. There it was, her last meeting, a cozy dinner with Mark that had ended with her disappearing into his car for a while. It was time for a little test. I decided to bring up Mark casually, as though it were a passing thought. "So," I started as we sat down for dinner, "Mark must be keeping you pretty busy these days." She barely glanced up, shoving her salad around her plate. "Yeah, you know how it is. Just a lot of projects and late nights. Must be a demanding guy," I continued, my tone light, almost playful. "You two seem to spend a lot of time together." She looked up, her smile faint but her eyes sharp. "He's just my boss, Ryan. We're busy with work." I raised an eyebrow. "So no chance for dinner or anything? You don't even get a breather?" She hesitated, caught off guard for a split second. "No, not really. Just business." Her words dripped with falseness, and I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. She was so used to deceiving me that she couldn't see through even a mild prod. Each time she denied her affair, each lie that dripped from her lips was another confirmation of her betrayal. The GPS tracker showed her car was parked at Mark's house that night. I didn't bother following her this time. I knew what I'd find. Instead, I sat at home, planning my next move. Eva was too wrapped up in her own games to see what was coming. Soon, she'd have no choice but to confront the truth head-on, and I would be ready to make sure she felt every bit of the betrayal she'd inflicted on me. With every lie Eva told, my resolve grew sharper. I spent my days acting the part of the doting husband, hiding my resentment beneath polite nods and casual smiles. She had no idea of the web I was spinning around her, nor did she suspect the layers of evidence I'd gathered. The footage from the drone, the GPS logs, the late-night texts I managed to glimpse, each one was a step closer to my planned reckoning. I knew I couldn't let her see my bitterness. She was too cunning and would easily spot any cracks in my facade if I wasn't careful. So I became attentive, almost too attentive. Every evening, I'd casually ask about her day, her work, the same questions I knew would lead to the same false answers. Each lie she gave strengthened my resolve, and each smile she flashed only served to fuel my sense of betrayal. Then, the opportunity for the perfect setup presented itself. Eva mentioned an upcoming work retreat over the weekend, conveniently located just an hour out of town. She'd be staying at a corporate guest house, a luxury cabin Mark's company had rented for the team. Her description was vague, filled with corporate jargon that didn't quite fit, but she seemed satisfied with her cover story. "Are you sure you'll be all right without me?" she asked, her tone syrupy sweet. "Oh, I'll manage," I replied, flashing a reassuring smile. "Besides, I have some drone projects to catch up on." I watched as her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of annoyance at the mention of my drone. I knew she hated the device. She'd always dismissed it as a toy and a waste of time. Little did she know, it was my silent partner in uncovering her betrayal. That Friday, she packed a small suitcase, carefully choosing each item with what she assumed was subtlety. As she kissed me goodbye, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I'd be tracking her every move this weekend, and the final pieces of evidence would fall into place. As her car pulled away, I waited until she was out of sight, then packed my own bag, ensuring I had everything needed for the task ahead. Driving to the cabin location she'd mentioned, I parked a short distance away, hidden from view. The GPS tracker showed her car parked just where she said it would be, and I knew I'd soon catch them in the act. No more need for assumptions or doubts. I launched the drone, flying it low and silent, its camera capturing every detail as it glided towards the cabin. Inside, I caught sight of them through the large glass windows. Eva was relaxed, comfortable in a way I hadn't seen her at home in months. She laughed, leaned close to Mark, their glasses clinking as they toasted to some private joke. A pang of anger twisted in my gut, but I held steady. I had a job to finish. Steeling myself, I zoomed in, capturing every affectionate touch, every look, every kiss. This was no business retreat. This was something else entirely. When they disappeared inside, I landed the drone, saving the footage to a secure folder on my laptop. It was time to set the next phase in motion. I wasn't planning just to confront her. I was going to make sure she faced every bit of this betrayal, and I'd be there to watch the mask slip from her face. The drive back home was surreal, as if I were floating above my own life, watching it play out like some twisted movie. I now had everything I needed, enough footage and evidence to make even the most oblivious person see the truth. But I didn't feel victorious. Instead, a hollow numbness set in, a kind of detached calm that held back the storm of emotions bubbling underneath. At home, I waited. I knew Eva would be gone until Sunday evening, giving me 2 full days to prepare. The plan came together piece by piece, fueled by every memory of her deception, every lie that had slipped so easily from her lips. I wanted her to experience the shock of betrayal, to see her comfortable world dismantled, just as she'd done to me. But I didn't want to lose control. This was about strategy, not blind rage. Saturday afternoon, I made my first call. A lawyer friend from college, Tom, owed me a favor, and I intended to collect. Tom was sharp, precise, and had a knack for handling cases with delicate matters, exactly what I needed. He agreed to meet me for a brief consultation, where I showed him the footage, the GPS logs, and all the other evidence I'd gathered. He leaned back, nodding with a grim expression as he flipped through the files. "This is solid," Tom said, setting down the last of the documents. "But Ryan, are you sure about this? There's no going back once this is in motion." I nodded, feeling a chill settle over me. "There's no other option, Tom." She made her choice. Now she has to face the consequences. We spent the next few hours drawing up a strategy, filing the necessary paperwork, and discussing the steps that would make my case airtight. By the end, I had a plan that was as foolproof as it was brutal. I thanked Tom and headed back, the weight of finality pressing down on me. Sunday came, and with it, the countdown to Eva's return. I spent the day preparing, making sure everything was in place, each detail checked and rechecked. The evidence was organized, copies made, each piece ready to be revealed at just the right moment. I even managed to set up hidden cameras in the living room and bedroom, ensuring that I'd capture every second of her reaction when she walked through the door. By evening, I was sitting in the dimly lit living room, waiting. I poured myself a drink, the quiet of the house punctuated only by the ticking clock on the wall. It was strange how calm I felt, as though I'd been preparing for this moment my entire life. A final glance at my watch told me it was time. Eva would be back any minute. The sound of her car pulling up echoed outside, and I leaned back, steeling myself for what was to come. I heard her key turn in the lock, and then the door swung open, her figure silhouetted in the doorway. She looked tired, a faint smudge of mascara under her eyes, a faint but satisfied smile lingering on her lips. Her eyes met mine, and she froze, the smile faltering as she registered the expression on my face. "Hey, Ryan?" Her voice wavered, a hint of uncertainty creeping in. "Welcome home," I said, my tone cold, almost foreign to my own ears. I gestured to the chair across from me. "We need to talk." She hesitated, glancing around as if searching for something familiar to anchor her. But I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew, or at least sensed, that everything was about to change. "Sit down," I said, my gaze unwavering. "You've got some explaining to do." Eva slowly lowered herself into the chair across from me, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for a way out. I could see the gears turning in her mind, calculating, scrambling to assess the situation. But I had control this time, and I wasn't letting her wriggle free with another well-crafted lie. So, I began, letting the silence stretch. "Did you have a good business retreat with Mark?" Her face paled, but she managed a tight, unconvincing smile. "Ryan, what's this about?" "It was just a work trip, like I told you." I leaned forward, holding her gaze. "Just a work trip?" My voice was calm, icy, and I could see her confidence wavering. "Don't insult me, Eva. I know about you and Mark." For a moment, she said nothing, her face a mixture of shock and indignation. Then she let out a small, incredulous laugh, one that betrayed her desperation. "Ryan, are you serious? You're accusing me of something so ridiculous?" "Ridiculous?" I echoed, feeling the anger flare up again. I picked up my laptop, turning the screen towards her. "I have footage, Eva, of you and him together." I clicked play, and the screen filled with images of her cozy dinner with Mark, the stolen glances, the intimate touches, the unmistakable betrayal. Her eyes widened as she watched, her hand instinctively covering her mouth. "What? How did you?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I used my drone," I replied coldly. "You know, that toy you kept dismissing. Turns out, it's pretty useful for capturing things you'd rather keep hidden." She looked away, her face flushed with shame and anger. "Ryan, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, isn't it?" I snapped, unable to contain the bitterness that had built up over weeks of watching her lie to my face. "Then explain it to me, Eva. Help me understand why you've been sneaking around with your boss, lying to me night after night." Her expression shifted, her face hardening as she crossed her arms defensively. "All right, fine," she said, her tone defiant. "Yes, I've been seeing Mark. But it's not what you think. It just happened. You haven't exactly been around, Ryan. You're always working, always lost in your own world. I needed someone who actually pays attention to me." I felt a wave of disbelief, her words twisting the knife deeper. "You're blaming this on me?" I asked, my voice quiet but dangerously close to breaking. "You betrayed me, Eva. You chose to keep secrets, to deceive me, over and over again. And now you're trying to turn it around on me?" She threw her hands up in frustration. "You never even noticed, Ryan. We were drifting apart, and you didn't care. Maybe if you hadn't been so wrapped up in your drone and your silly hobbies, I wouldn't have felt so alone." Her words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'd heard enough. "You're incredible, you know that? I gave everything to this marriage. I trusted you, defended you, and you threw it all away. And now, all you can do is make excuses." Eva's face twisted in anger, her voice rising. "Oh, Don't act like some perfect saint, Ryan. You're no innocent here. But I was done listening to her justifications. I reached into the drawer beside me, pulling out a manila envelope and tossing it onto the table in front of her. She looked at it, then back at me, her defiance slipping into confusion. "What's this?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "Open it," I said, leaning back, watching her with cold detachment. "Consider it the first chapter in the consequences of your actions." Slowly, she picked up the envelope, her hands shaking as she slid out the documents. Her eyes scanned the pages, her face growing paler with each line. Finally, she looked up at me, realization dawning in her eyes. You filed for divorce?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Congratulations," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Now, you don't have to lie anymore. You're free to be with Mark or anyone else. But don't think for a second you're walking away without consequences. This is just the beginning, Eva." Her face crumpled, the full weight of what she'd done settling over her. For the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes, and I felt a grim satisfaction as she finally understood that her actions had set in motion a storm she couldn't control. Eva sat there, clutching the divorce papers, her face drained of color. It was as if she were finally grasping that this wasn't just a heated argument, a moment she could brush off with a few tears or sweet words. This was the endgame, and she was losing control. "Ryan, please," she stammered, her voice trembling. "You don't have to do this. We can work through this. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but we've been together for so long. Doesn't that count for something?" Her desperation was palpable, and for a moment, a pang of sadness cut through me. I thought of all the years we'd spent together, the memories we'd built, the laughter we'd shared. But then I remembered the pain of each lie, each moment I'd watched her with Mark, and any sympathy I felt turned to steel. "Maybe it would have," I replied, my voice calm and measured, "if you'd shown me even an ounce of honesty. But you didn't, Eva. You chose deceit, over and over. And now, you have to live with the consequences." Tears began to pool in her eyes, and she reached out across the table, her hand trembling. "Ryan, please, just give me a chance to explain. It wasn't serious with Mark. I just needed someone to talk to." "Talk to?" I echoed, unable to keep the sarcasm from creeping into my tone. "Do you honestly think I believe that? I watched you, Eva. I saw everything. This wasn't about needing to talk. It was about betrayal." Her shoulders slumped, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished, as if the truth had stripped away the veneer she'd worn so confidently for so long. I don't know what to say," she whispered, looking down at her hands. "Then don't say anything," I replied, standing up. "Actions speak louder than words, Eva, and yours have already said enough." I walked away, leaving her in the silence of our once shared home. The truth was, I needed a moment to breathe, to process the raw emotions swirling inside me. Anger, betrayal, sadness, they all churned together, threatening to overwhelm me. But I reminded myself that this was the path I'd chosen, and there was no going back. I retreated to the bedroom, the place that had once been a sanctuary for us but now felt hollow, a shell of what it had been. I pulled out my phone, opening the file with the footage and notes I'd documented. Each piece of evidence represented a fragment of my broken trust, a reminder that Eva had shattered something I'd thought was unbreakable. After a while, I heard soft footsteps approaching, and Eva appeared in the doorway, her eyes red, her face streaked with tears. She looked at me, pleading, her voice barely a whisper. "Can we please just talk?" I stared at her, the woman I'd once loved without reservation, and felt a strange mixture of pity and disgust. "Talk about what, Eva? You've done enough talking, none of it truthful. Now, it's time for you to face the reality you created." "But, Ryan," she choked out, her voice breaking, "I still love you." The words hit me like a slap, almost laughable in their audacity. I shook my head, bitterness seeping into my voice. "If you loved me, Eva, you wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have betrayed me for someone else. Love doesn't destroy, it protects. And you destroyed everything. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other, the silence thick with the weight of everything left unsaid. I saw the regret in her eyes, but it was too little, too late. She had made her choices, and now she would have to live with them. Finally, I turned away, my voice steady but final. You should start packing, Eva. We both know you can't stay here anymore. Her face crumpled, and she let out a strangled sob. She didn't argue this time, didn't plead. Instead, she turned and walked away, the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall. I knew that soon, she'd be gone, and that part of my life would end. It wasn't the ending I'd wanted, but it was the one she had chosen. As I stood alone in our bedroom, the reality of the situation finally sank in. This was it. This was the beginning of a life without her, without the woman I'd devoted so much of myself to. I felt a strange emptiness, a hollow space where our shared memories once thrived. But underneath that emptiness was something else. Relief. The lies, the deceit, the constant second-guessing would be over. I could start fresh, rebuild my life from the ground up. After what felt like hours, I heard the soft creak of the floorboards as Eva walked back into the room, clutching a small suitcase. She looked at me, her expression filled with a desperation I hadn't seen before. "Ryan," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, don't do this. We can go to counseling, talk to someone, anything. Just don't let it end like this." I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar pang of betrayal mix with the weight of finality. "Eva, it ended the moment you chose to be with him. You had your chance, and you threw it away. There's nothing left to save." She opened her mouth, as if to argue, but then closed it, nodding slowly. For the first time, I saw resignation in her eyes. She finally understood that there would be no more chances, no more lies that would hold me in place. She wiped a stray tear from her cheek and picked up her suitcase, turning to leave the room without another word. I followed her to the front door, watching as she placed the suitcase by her side and took one last look around. Her gaze lingered on the photos on the wall, snapshots of happier times, vacations, family gatherings, random moments we'd shared over the years. I could see her eyes glaze over, the weight of what she'd lost finally dawning on her. Without thinking, she reached for one of the photos, a picture of us laughing on a trip we'd taken just a few years back. She held it in her hands, looking at it as if it were some relic from a forgotten life. I almost felt pity for her. Almost. "Keep it," I said, my voice firmer than I felt, a reminder of what could have been. She looked up, startled, as if my words had struck her more deeply than anything else. She placed the photo back on the shelf, her hand trembling as she released it. "Goodbye, Ryan," she murmured, her voice breaking as she took a step toward the door. I nodded, crossing my arms, feeling the weight of closure settle over me. "Goodbye, Eva." With that, she opened the door, taking one last look before she walked out, leaving the silence of our home behind. The door clicked shut, and I stood there, feeling an odd mixture of loss and liberation. I let out a slow breath, my gaze drifting over the remnants of our life together. This place, once filled with laughter and love, now felt like a museum of memories. But I knew what I needed to do. This wasn't just about cutting ties with Eva, it was about reclaiming my life. I grabbed a trash bag and walked over to the photos on the wall, the souvenirs we collected together, the reminders of a life that no longer belonged to me. One by one, I removed them from the wall, the clinking glass echoing through the empty room. This wasn't out of anger. It was a final act of letting go. As I placed the last photo in the bag, I felt a strange sense of calm. My life wasn't over. It was simply beginning anew. This house, these walls, the memories, all of it could be rebuilt, reshaped into something better, something honest. I made my way to the living room, where the divorce papers still sat on the table, Eva's signature scrawled beside mine. In a few weeks, this chapter would be legally over, and I could finally close the book on what we'd once shared. I picked up the papers, feeling the weight of freedom in my hands, and smiled. A small, bittersweet smile that hinted at the peace I knew was waiting for me on the other side of all this. The house felt eerily quiet after Eva's departure, each room echoing with memories of a life that felt like someone else's now. I sat in the living room, taking in the silence, feeling it settle around me like a heavy blanket. Part of me wanted to move out, to leave everything behind, but the stubborn side of me refused to be chased out of my own home. This place would become mine again, piece by piece, as I rebuilt my life. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The first step in reclaiming my space was to strip away the things that no longer served me. I started with the bedroom, clearing out the remnants of her clothes, her perfumes, the knickknacks that had cluttered every surface. It felt like purging a poison from my life. Each item that went into the donation pile was a weight lifted from my shoulders. The most challenging part, however, was the bed. Our bed had once been a place of intimacy, a sanctuary, but now it felt tainted. I decided to replace it entirely, along with everything in the room that held any connection to her. A fresh start, one room at a time. Throughout the day, I filled bags and boxes, piling them by the door to be hauled away. The process was exhausting, but with each sweep of the house, I felt lighter. I didn't realize how much her presence lingered in every corner until I began removing it. The house started to feel like a blank canvas, waiting for a new story, one where I was the sole author. In the middle of all this, I got a call from Tom, my lawyer friend. He'd finalized the divorce paperwork, ensuring everything was airtight. "You're set, Ryan," he said, his voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. "Once you file these, it's over." I thanked him, feeling the finality settle over me. It was surreal, the thought of truly being free from Eva. I hung up, staring at the paperwork he'd sent over. It was just a few signatures away from being done, and though it felt like a massive step, I didn't hesitate. I signed my name on the last line, a strange sense of relief washing over me. Once that was done, I knew there was something else I needed to do. I walked back into the living room and powered up my laptop, opening the folder with all the evidence I'd gathered. The photos, the GPS logs, the drone footage, they were no longer necessary. They'd served their purpose, and keeping them felt like holding onto a dark chapter one was ready to leave behind. With a deep breath, I selected the entire folder and hit delete. The files vanished, taking with them the burden of proof, the weight of betrayal. I didn't need reminders of what she'd done. I had survived it, moved past it. Now, I was free to look forward, not back. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a calmness I hadn't known in months. The bed was bare, stripped down to the mattress, but I didn't mind. It was symbolic of the emptiness that was slowly transforming into something new, something pure. In the morning, I would pick out new furniture, make plans, and start filling the spaces with things that reflected who I was becoming. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that this journey was just beginning. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to find out. The days turned into weeks, each one filled with small victories as I transformed my home and myself. I'd painted walls, bought new furniture, even redecorated with items that felt authentically me. The act of creating a space free from memories of Eva was therapeutic, a way of reclaiming my life and making peace with the past. Friends noticed the change in me. A lighter step, a renewed energy. I felt whole again, or at least closer to it. Then, one evening as I was sorting through some mail, a soft knock echoed through the house. It was almost 9, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Curious, I opened the door to find Eva standing there, looking nothing like the self-assured woman who'd once lived here. Her face was drawn, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked up at me, searching my face, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite place. Sympathy, perhaps, but laced with the bitterness of betrayal. "Ryan, I know I shouldn't be here, but I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I crossed my arms, keeping my tone neutral. "What do you want, Eva?" She glanced down, clutching her purse as though it were the only thing anchoring her. I needed to see you. I've been trying to move on, but it's harder than I thought. Mark," she hesitated, her voice faltering. "Mark and I, it didn't work out." The words hung in the air, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. I could have predicted this outcome, but hearing her admit it still brought a sense of closure. I let out a slow breath, keeping my expression impassive. That's not my problem anymore, Eva. She looked up, her eyes pleading. I know I messed up, Ryan. I made a terrible mistake. I thought Mark was what I needed, that he understood me in a way you didn't. But I was wrong. I see that now. It was an apology, the kind I had once longed to hear, but now it felt hollow. I shook my head, feeling a surge of anger I hadn't expected. And what? You thought you could just come back and everything would go back to the way it was? Her face crumpled, and she looked down, her voice cracking. No, I know that's not possible. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Truly. I realize now how much I hurt you, how selfish I was. The sincerity in her tone was undeniable, but it didn't sway me. I was done with apologies and empty promises. Eva, I've moved on. I don't need your apologies. What I needed was loyalty, honesty, and you threw those things away. She looked up, fresh tears in her eyes. Ryan, please, can we at least talk? Maybe go for a coffee? Just to clear the air? I felt myself softening slightly, not because I wanted her back, but because I knew there were things left unsaid, loose ends that might be worth tying up. Fine, I replied, sighing, but don't expect anything more than a conversation. She nodded, looking almost grateful, and we agreed to meet at a coffee shop the following day. As I closed the door behind her, I wondered if this was a mistake, if reopening that chapter, even briefly, would stir up emotions I'd worked so hard to bury. But there was a part of me that wanted to hear her out, to see if there was anything left worth salvaging in our shared history, even if it was just the understanding that we'd both changed, in very different ways. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop early, determined to maintain control of the situation. When she arrived, she looked hesitant, as though she didn't quite belong here anymore. We ordered our drinks and settled into a quiet corner, a tension hanging in the air between us. So, I started, breaking the silence. What do you want to say, Eva? She took a deep breath, her gaze steady for the first time. I know it's too late to fix anything. I just wanted you to know that. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I was blind, and I took you for granted. I thought I wanted more, but the truth is, I had everything I needed with you. I listened, her words washing over me, a strange sense of finality settling in. She was sincere, but it didn't change the past. It didn't erase the hurt. I appreciate that, Eva, but I think we're both better off apart. She nodded, her shoulders slumping slightly, as if a weight had finally lifted. We finished our drinks in silence, and as we stood to leave, I felt a strange sense of peace. We exchanged a brief, bittersweet hug before parting ways, knowing that this was truly the end. Walking away, I realized that I just closed the final chapter in our story, and for the first time, I felt truly free. After that final conversation with Eva, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted. The ghost of our relationship no longer haunted my home or my heart. I was ready to start fresh, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely excited about the future. I wasn't just moving on. I was actively building something new, piece by piece. In the days that followed, I threw myself into projects I'd been putting off for years. My drone business, which had initially been a hobby, was beginning to grow, and I poured my energy into expanding it. I spent hours researching, reaching out to potential clients, and refining my skills. I'd been hesitant before, but now, with my time and focus fully mine, I was ready to take the leap. As the business picked up, I found myself enjoying the challenges it presented. I had jobs lined up for real estate agents, construction sites, and even a small film crew that needed aerial shots. Each project felt like a step forward, a tangible marker of my progress and independence. The work kept me busy, and with each new client, I felt my confidence returning. One afternoon, while I was out on a shoot, I got a call from Tom, my lawyer friend. He'd been keeping tabs on the divorce proceedings, making sure everything was wrapped up cleanly. Ryan, I thought you'd like to know, he said, his voice light. The divorce is officially finalized. It's done. I took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. Thanks, Tom. Really. For everything. No problem. Hey, We should grab a beer sometime and celebrate your new-found freedom, he laughed. I chuckled, agreeing, and we set a date for the following weekend. Hanging up, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, closure, and a sense of accomplishment. I'd survived one of the most painful chapters of my life, and now it was officially behind me. That evening, I decided to treat myself. I picked up a new book, ordered takeout from my favorite restaurant, and spent the night on the couch, indulging in the simple pleasures of solitude. The silence that had once felt oppressive was now comforting. This was my space, and I was proud of it. In the weeks that followed, I reconnected with old friends, people I'd drifted away from during my marriage. I hadn't realized how isolated I'd become until I started reaching out again. Nights out with friends, weekend hikes, and casual dinners reminded me of the person I used to be, the version of myself I'd almost forgotten. One evening, while having coffee with a friend from college, she asked me about the business, genuinely interested. "You know, Ryan, it sounds like you're onto something amazing with this drone work. Have you thought about expanding even more?" I laughed, a little surprised. "Honestly, I've thought about it, but I don't know. It's just me right now." "Well," she replied, smiling, "maybe that's your next step. You could grow this into something big, hire a few people, maybe even get some office space. There's no limit to what you could do if you go for it." Her words lingered with me, sparking ideas that had been simmering beneath the surface. I'd started this business as a way to escape, a distraction from a marriage that was crumbling. But now, it was more than that. It was my future. I began to imagine what it could become, not just as a side hustle but as a full-fledged company. The prospect excited me, giving me a new purpose, a new dream to chase. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. My life was truly mine again, and the future was wide open. For the first time, I felt ready to embrace it, to build something meaningful from the ashes of the past. And I knew, deep down, that the best was yet to come. The idea of expanding the drone business consumed my thoughts, becoming a bright beacon of motivation that pushed me forward. In the days that followed, I sketched out plans, set goals, and even scouted for potential office spaces. I wanted to take this venture seriously, to give it every ounce of dedication I had. With the confidence growing inside me, I reached out to some local businesses to pitch my services. My first meeting was with a large real estate firm, one that managed commercial properties across the region. They were interested in using drone footage to capture expansive shots of their properties, a service that could set them apart from competitors. The manager, a sharp and insightful woman named Rachel, listened intently as I laid out my ideas. She nodded, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "I think this could be a great asset to our firm, Ryan. Let's start with a few trial shoots and see how it goes. If we like what we see, we'll talk about a longer-term arrangement." I left the meeting with a contract in hand and a feeling of triumph swelling in my chest. This was exactly the break I needed. Landing a deal with a major firm was the first step toward turning my business into something sustainable, something I could truly be proud of. As I poured myself into my work, I found a new rhythm, one that balanced my professional life and my personal growth. Each morning, I'd wake up, make a strong cup of coffee, and go over the day's schedule. My evenings were reserved for research and skill building. I devoured online courses on drone technology, video editing, and business management. Every new skill felt like a tool that would help me reshape my life. One Saturday afternoon, while out on a shoot for Rachel's firm, I met a videographer who specialized in weddings. She introduced herself as Lila, a petite, lively woman with a quick smile and an infectious laugh. We struck up a conversation while setting up our equipment, and it turned out she was looking to collaborate with a drone operator to expand her business. "It's funny, you know," she said, laughing. "I've been searching for someone who does drone work, but most people around here are just hobbyists. You actually take it seriously?" I shrugged, grinning. "Yeah, it started as a hobby, but now, I guess you could say I'm all in." She looked thoughtful for a moment, then extended her hand. "How about a partnership? I get requests all the time from couples who want aerial shots of their wedding venues. I could refer them to you, and we'd split the profits." The idea was intriguing, and Lila's energy was infectious. We exchanged numbers, agreeing to meet the following week to discuss the details. As I drove home, I couldn't help but feel excited. This was more than just a business opportunity. It was a chance to work with people who shared my passion, to build a network that went beyond the confines of my past life. With each new client, each partnership, I felt myself transforming. The weight of betrayal, the anger, the regret, it all seemed to fade, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and pride. I was building something real, something that couldn't be taken away by someone else's choices. For the first time, I felt like my life was truly my own, unburdened by the shadows of the past. That night, as I sat on my porch with a glass of whiskey, watching the stars above, I realized just how far I'd come. I'd lost something once, something I thought I could never live without. But now, I understood that losing it had been the best thing that could have happened. I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I'd ever been. And as the stars flickered above, I raised my glass to the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. The collaboration with Lila was like a breath of fresh air. We met the following week at a cozy cafe downtown to hammer out the details of our partnership. Lila's enthusiasm was contagious as we discussed potential clients and ways to combine our services into unique packages. She was full of creative ideas, and the ease with which we clicked felt natural, like I'd known her far longer than just a few days. "So, here's what I'm thinking," she said, leaning forward, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We could offer couples a package that includes both ground and aerial footage. I can handle the on-the-ground shots, capturing all the intimate moments, while you can shoot the venue, the crowd, and everything from above. It'll be a view that'll take their breath away." I nodded, impressed by her vision. "I like it. It'd be like giving them the whole story of their day from every possible angle." Our conversation flowed smoothly, and I found myself talking not only about work, but about life. For the first time, I shared my journey over the past few months with someone outside my circle. I didn't go into all the gritty details, but enough to let her know that I'd recently been through a major life shift. Lila listened intently, her expression one of genuine empathy. "That must have been tough," she said softly, looking down for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "But here you are, creating something amazing out of it. Not everyone can say that." Her words struck a chord, and I felt a sense of gratitude, not only for the opportunity to work with her, but for having someone who could understand. Lila's warmth and sincerity felt like a reminder that there were good, genuine people out there, people who could see past the surface and appreciate resilience. It was a stark contrast to what I'd been used to, and I realized how much I'd missed having that kind of connection. Over the next few weeks, Lila and I worked seamlessly together, blending our skills to create something unique for our clients. Wedding after wedding, we captured moments that mattered, creating memories that would last a lifetime for others. Each successful project fueled my motivation, pushing me to improve, to refine my craft, and to push the boundaries of what my drone could capture. And as our business relationship flourished, so did our friendship. We spent long hours on shoots, chatting in between shots about everything from photography to our favorite movies, from our dreams to the places we wanted to visit. Lila had a vibrant energy that made every moment feel like an adventure, and I found myself looking forward to the time we spent together more and more. One evening, after a particularly beautiful shoot on a lakeside property, we decided to grab dinner at a small, dimly lit restaurant nearby. Over plates of pasta and a bottle of wine, our conversation turned a little more personal, a little more vulnerable. I shared things with her that I hadn't even fully admitted to myself, about the pain of betrayal, the isolation that had come with it, and the long road it had taken to find myself again. Lila listened with a kind of patience and understanding that made it easy to open up. When I finished, she reached across the table, resting her hand on mine briefly, a gesture that felt warm and grounding. "Ryan," she said softly, "you've been through a lot, but I can see the strength it's given you. Not many people would have the courage to rebuild like you have." Her words hung in the air between us, a reassurance that I hadn't expected. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not as the man who had been betrayed, but as someone strong, resilient, and worthy of connection. As we finished our meal, a comfortable silence settled between us. Walking out of the restaurant, We lingered by the door, neither of us in a rush to leave. The night was calm, and the stars above mirrored the quiet sense of contentment I felt within. Without thinking, I turned to her, a small smile on my lips. "Thank you, Lila, for everything. You don't know how much this partnership and this friendship has meant to me." She smiled back, her eyes warm and filled with understanding. "You're welcome, Ryan. And for what it's worth, I'm glad we met." In that moment, I felt something shift, a quiet, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to open my heart again. The weeks that followed my dinner with Lila were some of the best I'd had in years. Every project we tackled together brought us closer, both as business partners and friends. Our chemistry on shoots was undeniable, and we'd fallen into a rhythm, each knowing exactly what the other needed without saying a word. I couldn't help but feel a growing admiration for her. She was passionate, unafraid to take risks, and dedicated to her craft, traits I hadn't seen in someone for a long time. As the wedding season hit its peak, we found ourselves busier than ever. One Saturday, after a long day of shooting at a sprawling vineyard, we lingered at the venue, watching the sun dip below the rows of grapevines. The guests had left, the celebration had quieted, and we stood there, the cool evening breeze wrapping around us, both reluctant to let the day end. Lila broke the silence, leaning against a nearby fence, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You know, I used to dream of doing something like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it would ever happen, but here we are." I looked at her, feeling an odd sense of pride for how far she'd come, and for being part of her journey. "You made it happen, Lila. You had the vision. I'm just lucky I get to be along for the ride." She laughed softly, her eyes meeting mine, and in that moment, I realized I wanted to be more than just her business partner. There was something unspoken between us, a warmth that had grown steadily since we first met. It scared me, but it also felt right. "Ryan," she said, her voice soft, "I know we're business partners, and we've become friends, but," she paused, searching for the words, "I just want you to know that working with you has been different. Special, even." Her words echoed what I'd been feeling but hadn't dared to voice. "I feel the same way," I replied, stepping a little closer. "These last few months, they've changed a lot for me. I don't think I realized how much until now." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with an unspoken understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of something fragile yet profound. She looked at me, her eyes bright in the fading light, and I felt the weight of possibility hanging between us. Acting on instinct, I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into my touch, her smile soft and inviting. And in that quiet vineyard, with only the rustling vines and the distant hum of crickets as witnesses, I leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was gentle, tentative at first, as if both of us were testing the waters of something new. But it quickly deepened, a spark igniting between us that had been waiting to catch fire. When we pulled back, both of us breathless, she looked at me with a mixture of surprise and joy. "Well," she said with a grin, "I didn't see that coming, but I'm glad it did." I chuckled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Me too. I guess I've been waiting for the right person to come along." Turns out, she was right here all along. We spent the rest of the evening walking through the vineyard, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. I felt a sense of peace, a gentle contentment that had eluded me for so long. Lila wasn't just a new chapter in my life. She was a whole new book, one filled with laughter, adventure, and warmth. As we made our way back to our cars, she turned to me, her smile playful. "So, where do we go from here?" I took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Wherever we want, Lila. This is just the beginning." That night, as I drove home, I knew that I'd found something real, something worth holding on to. Life had a way of taking unexpected turns, but for the first time, I felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The morning after that night with Lila, everything felt different. Waking up, I no longer felt haunted by the past or weighed down by regrets. Instead, there was an unmistakable lightness, a sense that I was exactly where I was meant to be, with the right person by my side. This wasn't about escaping the shadows of what I'd been through, but about embracing the possibilities of what was to come. Lila and I kept our relationship quiet at first, letting it unfold naturally as we navigated the blend of business and personal life. Our partnership evolved, deepening with every shared glance, every laugh, every spontaneous road trip for work. We pushed each other creatively, and the results spoke for themselves. The clients loved our unique combination of aerial and traditional photography, and our small business was blossoming faster than either of us had anticipated. One evening, after a long day, we sat on her porch with glasses of wine, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She leaned into me, her head resting comfortably on my shoulder, and we talked about the future, what we wanted, where we saw ourselves going. For the first time, I felt safe enough to dream openly, unburdened by doubts or fears. "What if we expanded the business even further?" she asked, her voice a mix of excitement and wonder. "Maybe add more photographers, travel to new locations, offer video packages. We could create something really special." I smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "I'm all in. Let's build something together, something that's ours." It felt surreal to plan a future again, to look ahead without the weight of betrayal clouding my vision. Lila had become more than a partner or even a girlfriend. She was my confidant, my inspiration, the person who'd shown me that life could be beautiful again. As our business continued to grow, so did our relationship. We explored new places together, meeting clients in beautiful locations and carving out moments just for ourselves. There was a quiet harmony to our lives, a balance that brought peace and excitement in equal measure. And through it all, I felt my old self returning, the version of me that was hopeful, open-hearted, and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. One rainy evening, as we were cleaning up after a shoot, Lila looked at me with a mischievous smile. "You know, I've been thinking, we should find our own place. A little office we can call ours. Something that's not just a part of our past, but a real symbol of what we're building together." I nodded, the idea sparking a thrill inside me. "Let's do it. A fresh start in every way." We found a small studio downtown, a space flooded with natural light and enough room for all our equipment, plus a cozy corner where we could dream up new ideas together. The space became our sanctuary, a place where work and love intertwined, each feeding off the other, creating something greater than we could have imagined alone. As I stood there on the day we officially moved in, watching Lila arrange our photos on the walls, I realized that life had finally come full circle. I'd been through the fire, faced the depths of heartbreak, and emerged stronger, more resilient, and with a heart ready to embrace whatever came next. Lila glanced over her shoulder, catching me watching her. She smiled, that familiar glint in her eye, and walked over, slipping her hand into mine. "To new beginnings," she said, raising an imaginary glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, pulling her close. In that moment, I knew that this was more than just a new chapter. It was a whole new story, one that was ours to write. And for the first time, I felt truly free. Have you ever faced a tough turning point in life that led to something unexpected? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of resilience, hope, and new beginnings. ***.